It started with a phone call, not a 911 emergency, but close enough. A retired police officer staring out at the Arizona sky dialed the National UFO Reporting Center just after 8:30 p.m. on March 13th, 1997. His voice was calm, trained, professional, but there was a tension beneath it. He said there were lights, massive ones, silent, moving in formation over the city. He wasn't alone. Within minutes, the phones lit up, not just at the National UFO Reporting Center, but at local news stations, police departments, the Luke Air Force Base. People from Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, Chandler, Glendale, ordinary people, families, pilots, doctors, teachers, were reporting the same thing. An enormous V-shaped object gliding slowly and silently across the night sky. Some said it was as large as a football field. Others swore it was a mile wide. It didn't blink. It didn't hum. It didn't leave a trail. It just passed overhead. And then it was gone. What happened that night remains one of the most widely witnessed and hotly debated mass sightings of an unidentified flying object in American history. And yet, decades later, there's still no clear answer to what those thousands of people saw in the skies over Phoenix. But we do know this. The government's explanation didn't come for months, and when it did, it only made things worse. This is the story of the Phoenix Lights, and whatever they really were, someone didn't want you to know. The sun had just set on that Thursday night in March. It was a cool, dry evening, typical of the Sonoran Desert in spring. People were outside in their backyards, some setting up telescopes to watch the Hale-Bopp comet, which was making one of its closest approaches to Earth. And that's when the first reports began. Just after 7:55 p.m., 5 bright lights were seen in a formation over Henderson, Nevada. A man reported them moving slowly southeast, forming a V-shape. He said it was like nothing he'd ever seen. Minutes later, over Paulden, Arizona, another witness, a former Air Force officer, reported a massive object with 5 lights moving in the same direction. This wasn't a quick flash in the sky. Witnesses were describing something that lingered, hovered, drifted almost imperceptibly across the landscape, as if watching. As the object continued southward, it passed over Prescott, then Dewey, then Cordes Lakes. By the time it reached Phoenix, around 8:30 p.m., hundreds of people had seen it. And they weren't describing lights anymore. They were describing a craft. It was silent, absolutely silent, and it blocked out the stars. One of the most striking reports came from a family in Prescott Valley. They said the object passed directly over their house. They could see its structure. It wasn't just lights. It was solid, massive, and low to the ground. One of the children, a young boy, stared up in awe and whispered, "Mommy, are we safe?" Farther south, in Phoenix, a man named Tim Lay and his family were driving when they saw the lights approaching. They pulled over and got out of their car. What they saw was a V-shaped formation of lights, 5 across the leading edge, with 2 trailing lights in the rear. It moved slowly and deliberately, right over their heads. Tim would later say, "It was so big, we couldn't see the edges. It looked like it was part of the sky." They stood there, frozen, as the silent behemoth drifted overhead. They were close enough to make out the shape, to feel its presence, and they weren't the only ones. Phone lines at local radio stations were jammed. One station, KTAR in Phoenix, had its entire phone system crash under the weight of the calls. Local television newsrooms were inundated with reports. "Did you see it? It just flew over my house." There were no wings, no sound. It blocked the stars. People described it differently. Some said it looked boomerang-shaped. Others swore it was like a carpenter's square. But almost all agreed on one thing. It was massive, dark, and utterly silent. A pilot in the area contacted air traffic control at Sky Harbor International Airport. No radar returns, nothing in their airspace. The pilot asked, "Do you have anything on your scope?" The answer was no, and yet the object kept moving. By 10 p.m., the sightings had tapered off. But then, around 10:30 p.m., a second event occurred. This time, witnesses across Phoenix and the surrounding areas saw a series of stationary lights hovering in the sky. Bright, evenly spaced, hanging above the Estrella Mountains to the southwest of the city. They stayed there for several minutes, forming an arc. Then, one by one, they disappeared. This second event was captured on video from multiple angles. The footage would later be broadcast on national news. It was now undeniable. Something had happened over Phoenix that night. But what? In the immediate aftermath, there was silence. No statement from the Air Force, no explanation from local officials. It wasn't until June, more than 3 months later, that the U.S. military issued a formal response. They claimed the lights seen around 10:30 p.m., the second event, were military flares dropped during a routine training exercise at the Barry Goldwater Range, over 60 miles away. According to them, the lights had hung in the air due to the altitude and the heat of the flares' parachutes. But that only accounted for the second sighting. The massive, silent, V-shaped craft seen between 7:30 and 9:30 p.m., no explanation was given. In fact, it was never acknowledged at all. For the witnesses, that was the most unsettling part. They had seen something enormous pass over them, slowly, silently, at low altitude. And yet the government pretended it never happened. Local leaders weren't helpful either. When reporters asked then-Governor Fife Symington for comment, he deflected. In fact, on June 19th, Symington held a press conference, jokingly announcing that the culprit behind the lights had been found. Then, to everyone's disbelief, a staffer in an alien costume was led onto the stage in handcuffs. It was meant as satire. But for those who had seen something unexplainable, it felt like mockery. Symington would later regret it. 10 years later, in 2007, long after he left office, Fife Symington sat down for an interview. And this time, he wasn't joking. He admitted that he had seen the lights that night, just like everyone else. He described a massive craft, triangular in shape, moving silently over the city. It was enormous, he said. It was just otherworldly. In your gut, you could just tell it was not from here. His confession reignited public interest in the case. If the governor had seen it and believed it was something unknown, how could it be dismissed? The Phoenix lights were no longer just an anomaly. They were a cover-up. In the years since, theories have ranged wildly. Some believe the first event, the V-shaped craft, was a classified military aircraft, something like a next-gen stealth blimp or a black project funded by the Pentagon's shadow budget. Others believe it was extraterrestrial. The sheer size, the silence, the complete lack of radar signature, none of it fits conventional aviation. Still others say it was a psychological operation, a test to see how the public would react, how the media would handle mass sightings, how quickly people could be made to doubt their own eyes. But the most enduring theory is the simplest. People saw something real, something massive, something that has never been explained. In the decades since, similar sightings have occurred in other parts of the world. Massive, silent triangular or V-shaped craft. Slow-moving, luminous, terrifying. But none have matched the scale of what happened over Arizona in 1997. To this day, the Phoenix lights remain one of the most widely seen, most photographed, and most unexplained UFO events in modern history. And the people who saw it? They never forgot. They still remember the moment when the stars disappeared, and something darker moved silently overhead. They still wonder why no one ever took them seriously, and they still ask the same question. If it wasn't ours, whose was it? Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.